What is the genius of the West? What makes the West exceptional in your view?
What Rafe says next is the most fascinating explanation of Western culture we've ever heard on trigonometry.
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, that requires another hour-long discussion, actually, because the Western mind is actually different to the non-Western mind. The Occidental mind, on many different levels. The genius of the West comes down to the fact that Westerners view the world differently. I mean, there's a chap called Joseph Heinrich who's written a book about this, the weirdest people in the world. Weird means Western, educated, industrial, rich, and developed. And so, for example, Westerners or weird society people are very bad at facial recognition because we only use the right hemisphere for facial recognition, whereas non-Western cultures use both the left and the right. When it comes to memory, attention, spatial awareness, visual reasoning, there is a difference between both societies. Now, why is that? Well, he traces this back down to 1,000 years ago, to when the Western Church, later to become the Catholic Church, banned cousin marriages. Because up to that point, the whole world had clans and kinship based upon these large extended families where your first, second, third, fourth cousins were all deemed to be equal to brothers and sisters. And because of that, those clan societies were very much based upon nepotism, upon obedience to authority, upon conformity. What happened in the West is once you banned marriage between certain degrees of consanguinity, you got the birth of the nuclear family, which doesn't exist elsewhere. So 75% of the world still has cousin marriages. About 90% of the world doesn't have the same notion of the exclusive nuclear family that we have. And once you had the nuclear family devoid of its external connections to clanship, suddenly you got the birth of individuality and innovation, because the nuclear family then had to rely on contact with strangers. And the discerning feature of the West has been its levels of high social trust and its faith in their fellow neighbors. Can you trust somebody else? Will you actually help them in a moment of need and so forth? You don't find that in non-Western cultures. And this is a long way to answer your question,
no, please,
but I think it's...
Great. Take all the time, because this is the best bit. This is so fascinating. Please carry on.
And so what then happened is you had these individual nuclear families, and they then had to rely on others for different types of help and services. And people then began to choose occupations of their own choice for the first time. And through that, you then had people forming contracts with other people. Will you do this for me? And so you get the birth of contracts in Western culture. And they began to come together through guilds, the original sort of trade unions, get together through confraternities, get together through the establishment of universities, and getting together through charter towns. Charter towns are towns that you have to apply to join, and you take an oath saying, I will live up to my responsibilities to help develop this. And once you have this cross-pollination between all of these different uniquely Western institutions arising, you get innovation. And social trust is intrinsically linked to economic prosperity and innovation. And individualism, of course, was core to this. That was the foundation for the uniqueness of the West, because it's not found anywhere else. And it was on that basis and on those building blocks that you began to see the development of a very different type of mentality, a very different type of view in the world. And you see evidence of it today. For example, if you look at notions of guilt. So guilt is very much a Western concept. It now expands because of industrialization. You find it in Japan and elsewhere, but it's something which when we do something bad, we feel guilty because we have let ourselves down as individuals. We haven't lived up to our own moral code. Elsewhere in the world, I mean, it's not black and white, right? There are gradations of this everywhere now, but it's shame that determines all of this. I have dishonored my family. So also, for example, if you ask a Westerner to identify themselves, they will use achievements and attributes. So you would say, I'm Francis, I'm a stand-up comedian, I'm an extroverted introvert, and I collect, milk bottle tops or whatever, right? You then ask you ask someone from in an area of Africa, for example, they will say, well, I'm X, I'm the son of Y, I'm the husband of Z, and I'm the father of so-and-so. So again, it's family connections that identify who the person is. And The Anglosphere particularly exploded as a birthplace of notions of liberty and the Industrial Revolution and so forth, also because of the rise of Protestantism, because Protestantism separated or removed the priest from the equation. So people then had to read the Bible themselves. They had to become literate. And so the growth of literacy came out of Protestantism. And that's why you see the most individual countries in the world on the ranking. America and Canada are the most individualistic. Then it's Australia. Then it's the UK. And then it's the Scandinavian countries, which of course are also Protestant. And I find this theory of Joseph Heinrichs very, very compelling. And you can actually see it on a granular level. So if you look at Italy, for example, the Western Church's ban on cousin marriage was applied very rigorously in northern Italy, but not in southern Italy. And if you want to see the difference in the cultures between North and South Italy has a great deal of corruption. There's a reason why the Cosa Nostra, the mafia families came into an evolution there. It's fascinating to determine that even within the European context, let alone in the broader globally. So anyway, I would say that is the origins and reason for Western exceptionalism.